Peggy gave me this in case I just brought 3 paper towels. I thought, hopefully I won't need any of them. That's not what I'm here to do, or try to do. It's going to be hard. I didn't go Hawaiian shirt today because that was Corm's thing. That wasn't mine. I gave him his first Hawaiian shirt. And boy, if I'd have known where that was going to lead. So you can see in the pictures here, some of them are okay, some of them are a little iffy. But I knew I wanted to wear this hat because he brought it back from Hawaii for me. And it has a dolphin on it wearing sunglasses. And it says Punk Dolphin on it. And he brought it down and he gave it to me. And I looked at him like, what? I'm not really into dolphins or what? He says, I just think you need a pink hat. I said, okay. All right. We were over at Estes Park once for a golf tournament. We got out of the car, and somebody, I don't know who, from over on the driving range said, hey, Cormey, did you skin your couch? It had a lot of flowers on it, looked like a couch. Maybe you had to see the shirt. Well, that's one. If I could just say, I wasn't going to say something about this. If we'd have had one of these in the Lariat, I can tell you the alligator song and all those would have really gone. I don't know what this done, but I could just see Al really giving it hell, Have to get this where I can see it here. Cormie actually came up to Grand Lake earlier than it said in the paper. He came up in the late 70s, right after he got out of college. He was a potato farmer in Greeley, really. And he would come up here. I don't know how he got started coming to Grand Lake. And he would come up on the weekends, and then he'd drive home, and he'd potato farm. And he would drive back and forth over, of course, Trail Ridge Road. And on one of those trips over Trail Ridge Road, he put his Vega in the Big Thompson River. And we're lucky we ever got to know him at all. And he crawled out, and he was okay. And he noticed that his car lights were shining up out of the water. And he was going to go back in and shut them off. And luckily, another guy had come along and stopped and said, no, I think the lights are fine. We won't worry about that. And so then after a couple years of driving back and forth, he decided to move to Grand Lake. And him and a couple guys lived in the Kaufman house. And I used to like to kid him that, not everybody had their house turned into a museum while they were still alive. And I know there's somebody, I know Jim Cervenka's here from the Historical Society. If you want to know what those notches in the window sills of the bedrooms are for, see me after. They're not how many buffalo Ezra Kaufman shot, I can tell you that. But they had quite a time, and it was some fun days. And then in the fall of '79, he moved to Colorado Springs to join a band called Phantom Hooters. Not the Starlight Ramblers, although they were a good band, but that wasn't them. And he lived right next door to me. He moved in, I knew the guys in the band, and we pretty much hit it off right off. And I'll tell you, those were some fun days. And to say that we lived like a bunch of overgrown college students was not out of, that's just what we did. We went out, those guys played 6 nights a week. We went out 6 nights a week, we partied 6 nights a week, and we didn't rest on the 7th. And the only bad part about that was that I was the only one that had to get up and go to work the next day. Everybody else in the band, sure, they could sleep till noon. But as you can see from some of these pictures coming up, we had some Bronco. We had a Bronco party every single week. We didn't just do it once in a while. We did it every week. And, of course, we had some bad downfalls there, but, and it just was, you just never knew what was going to happen next. I came home from work one afternoon, and there were people at my apartment. The barbecue was on, music was on, everybody's around. I come in, I said, what's going on? Cormie says, you're having a barbecue. Okay, let me get changed. And we, like I said, we were pretty good friends right off. And he told me, and I remember him saying this, he said, I moved down from a little town you'd really like. And he was right. And so we came up for Rude Awakening, 1980, Rude Awakening of 1980. And Cormey and two other guys in his band, and I drove up, and we pulled up in front of Squeaky Bob's. It was snowing. There wasn't another car on the street. And he jumped up and ran in. We thought maybe he just had to go to the John. And we kind of looked up and down the street and said, oh, so this is it, huh? Well, we went in, and of course he met us at the door with a tray of jack shoes, is why he had rushed in. And so we pretty much got broke into Grand Lake pretty quick right then. But I always know when that day was because Mount St. Helens blew up that day. And I always thought it was a coincidence, but I don't know. But, and then in the next years, his band would play up here during the summer, and we would come up and just have a heck of a time. I mean, it was unbelievable. And then he decided to move back up here. His first marriage that I helped disintegrate didn't work out, and turned out I was more fun to drink with. And so he moved back here in the 80s, and he was playing at the Beer Garden and at the Lariat. And then it wasn't long after that, my wife and I moved back up here. She didn't like the big city much either, and well, that's what she said. And so we moved back, and Corm, we were just back together again. We got to do things, and he was a guy that loved a joke, and he loved to, if he could mess with you or goof you, as he used to call it, he would do it. And some of the things I remember, he helped him put the speaker in the Lariat in the buffalo head and the pig head, so that people, at one time the pig head was in the women's bathroom, and they would wait for somebody to go in there, give them a minute, then somebody would get on the mic and say, oh, nice underwear. And the screams coming out, and they'd shoot out that door and look around, and we'd all be, what? We don't. And then, of course, if anybody sat under the buffalo, they would get on and say, would you scratch my nose? And would you? And they'd finally get him to do it, and he'd say, oh, that feels so good. Now, would you go next door and scratch my butt? They put, he used to go out every year and put a red light in a hole that he had drilled on the deer crossing sign outside of town so it looked like Rudolph. And he'd go out there every December and do that. And I said, you know, Cormey, that's illegal. Oh, well, he says, they won't worry about that, you know. And evidently they didn't. Walter came in one day after we'd put our new pedestrian signs up in the street, and he made a comment about it was about time that a small black guy could walk across the street and have his own sign. Well, Cormey, that wasn't good enough. He made little saxophones that matched, and he went and put them on every single sign down the street, so it looked like Walter crossing the street with a saxophone. And Ted Rorda, a lot of you know Ted, who called me. He couldn't come up. The weather was bad. You know, I said, Ted, we know you're there with us. He decided he'd cut down a tree at his house, and he wasn't going to have it done professionally. So he got a rope, had his wife Babe on it, who weighed about $110. She was the counterweight, so it wouldn't hit the garage. Well, it's my understanding, if I remember right, when it came down, it didn't hit the garage, but it took out a fence, a boat, and part of his neighbor's shed or something along those lines. Well, of course, Cormey couldn't just let that go. He put an ad in the local paper for Rorda's Lumberjack Service, put his phone number on it, and he actually got calls. And then up at the golf course, they had little wooden signs on all the tee boxes, and they were advertisement signs. And you'd pay the rec district so much, and they would put this sign up for the year. Well, Cormey made those. Well, he made one for Rorda's Lumberjack Service. Beautiful little sign, put it up on one of the holes that didn't have one, never said a thing to Ted about it, and just waited for one day for him to see it. Then, of course, he finally did. Oh, yeah, that's been there for all summer, Ted, you know. But he loved to goof with you. And we played a lot of golf, and we weren't very good at it. But I suspect the fact that we were more concerned about where the beer cart was than where the hole was might have had something to do with it. But we got in a little tussle with the men's club at one time, and so we all quit. Well, what the tussle was, they were stupid enough to let us use 80% of our handicap for a tournament, and our 80% was way more than anybody else's 100%. So we won a tournament, and they didn't like it much, so we quit. And we started our own kind of little club we called the Tuesday Ted Club with Ted Warda, and we had our own tournaments, and we had an awful lot of fun doing that. And as Shelley had said, Cormey was already planning on leaving town. I say here I've written down, with the sudden, unexpected, and stupid closing of the Lariat, he was out of work. So he was going to move to wherever. I don't know if they knew. He talked about Colorado Springs, possibly maybe going back, playing with some of the guys in the band. Kind of like Jake and Elwood, getting the band back together. And but I always knew that he'd be back. But I guess not this time. And it's been a bad couple of years for me, for Grand Lake. And just the thought of going to any fundraiser or birthday party or wedding, or it didn't matter what it was. It could have been the opening of the laundromat. There'd be Cormey sitting there with his guitar, as he said, playing, not getting paid. Probably should have been somewhere getting paid, but no, this was more important. And that's what he did. Kind of guy he was. And I'm going to miss him an awful lot. If I can get through this in, I'll get off here. One more thing. At the Wizard of Oz always says to the Tin Man that your heart's not judged by how much you love, but by how much you are loved. Well, Cormey was loved, no doubt.